Hello, friends. I'm Lauren. I never thought that something as simple as my homemade lasagna would be the first sign of trouble in my marriage. Here I am, in my early 40s, living what I once thought was the Canadian dream, a lovely house in the suburbs, a husband with a successful career, and enough time to enjoy my passion for cooking. That was my life, or at least I thought it was. My husband, Larry, is the classic big corporate guy. He has his tailored suits, his big office in the city, and the confidence that comes with a high-powered job. When we first got married, he couldn't stop complimenting my cooking. "Lauren, this pot roast is amazing," he would say, or "your apple pie could win a prize." Hearing these words made me feel special, like I was adding something good to his life. But recently, something has changed. At first, it was just small things, like a raised eyebrow or a quiet "it's fine" after tasting my food. Then, he started comparing my cooking to his mom's. "You know, my mom always adds a little nutmeg to her meatloaf," he'd say, or "Mom's pasta is always perfectly al dente. Do you think this is a bit overcooked?" I brushed it off at first, but it began to sting a little. Larry's mother, Kelly, lives only a few blocks away. She's a big presence in our lives, even if we don't see her every day. Every Saturday, we have dinner at her place, and it always feels like a test. She watches everything I put on the table, giving me these looks and making little comments that seem harmless on the surface, but sting when you think about them. She'll smile and say, "Oh, I didn't know you used that much salt," or "Interesting way to season the chicken." It's her way of saying my cooking doesn't match her standards. Then last night, something happened that truly upset me. I had spent hours preparing a roast chicken for dinner, carefully seasoning and roasting it. As I served it, I noticed Larry was taking a picture of the food. I thought maybe he was just proud of what I'd made, wanting to save the memory. But later that night, I couldn't sleep. I went downstairs to get a glass of water, and I saw Larry's phone on the kitchen counter, flashing with a notification. I knew it wasn't right, but I looked. What I found shocked me. There was a whole album of photos. Pictures of almost every meal I had cooked in the past month, all sent to one person, his mom. I scrolled through the messages, my heart sinking. The latest message from her read, "Oh dear, the chicken looks dry. Remind Lauren that a proper brine would fix that. I'll send her my recipe." Reading those words hurt more than I expected. I felt betrayed, not just because he was sharing my efforts with his mom, but because he let her criticize me from afar. It was as if my hard work in the kitchen was never enough, not for Larry, and certainly not for Kelly. That night, I realized this wasn't just about food. It was about feeling unappreciated and overlooked in my own home. I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. All this time, every meal I had lovingly prepared was being secretly photographed and sent to Larry's mom for her expert opinion. The betrayal hurt more than any complaint Larry had ever made. I wanted to yell at him, to ask him why he was doing this, but instead, I went back to bed, my mind racing with questions. What else had he been sharing with her? How long had this been going on? And why wasn't I enough for him? As I lay there, staring at the ceiling, I realized that this situation was about more than just food. It was about respect, trust, and how I was slowly losing my sense of self-worth. But what could I do? Larry was my whole world, and the thought of causing a big fight scared me. So I did what I thought a good wife should do. I pretended I hadn't seen those messages, and I told myself I'd try harder tomorrow. The next morning, I got up early and made Larry's favorite breakfast. I wanted to prove to him, and maybe to his mom too, that I could be the perfect wife they seemed to expect. But deep inside, a small voice kept telling me that something had changed. The picture-perfect marriage I thought we had was starting to show cracks, and I wasn't sure how to fix it, or if I even wanted to anymore. Days blurred together as I tried harder and harder to be the perfect wife. But it felt like no matter what I did, it was never enough. My world became smaller, limited to the walls of our home. Each day seemed to give Larry a new reason to criticize me. At a work function, he whispered, "Lauren, stand up straight. You're embarrassing me." Another time, he patted my stomach and suggested I skip dessert, even though I hadn't gained any weight. Each comment, each criticism, chipped away at me bit by bit. My phone buzzed with another missed call from Joyce, my best friend. She wanted to talk, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. I didn't want to admit to her how unhappy I had become or how much I had changed. One rainy afternoon, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. I barely recognized the woman staring back. There were dark circles under my eyes, my hair looked dull, and a permanent frown seemed to have settled on my face. When had I become this shadow of myself? From downstairs, I heard Larry and his mom, Kelly, laughing together. Their laughter was light and carefree, filling the house while I stood there feeling empty. I walked to the top of the stairs and just listened. I felt like I was on the outside, looking into my own life, wondering how things had gone so wrong and if I would ever find a way to feel like myself again. I don't know how you put up with her, Kelly laughed, her voice sharp. Remember when she tried to make beef Wellington? What a disaster. Mom, be nice, Larry chuckled in response. She tries. It's kind of cute, really, like watching a kid play house. Something inside me broke. I quickly stepped back into the bedroom, feeling my chest tighten and my breath come in short, panicked gasps. The walls seemed to close in, and my vision blurred as tears filled my eyes. I reached for my phone with shaking hands and dialed the one person I could trust completely, Joyce. Joyce, I managed to say in a choked whisper, I need help. Oh my God, Lauren. Where have you been? I've been so worried about you. Joyce replied, her voice filled with concern. As soon as she spoke, everything I had been holding in for so long started to pour out. Years of pain, frustration, and feeling small just spilled over. I told her about the constant criticism, the way Larry and Kelly made me feel, and how I felt like I was losing myself in my own marriage. Joyce listened patiently, her calm voice comforting me. Listen to me, she said firmly. This isn't normal, Lauren. What Larry's doing is not okay. You need to think about leaving. But where would I go? I whispered, feeling scared and lost. What would I do? First things first, she said gently. I'm texting you the number for a therapist, Dr. Peter. She specializes in helping people in situations like this. Promise me you'll call her. I looked at the number on my phone screen, feeling both nervous and hopeful. It felt like a small light in the middle of all the darkness around me. With shaky hands, I dialed Dr. Peter's office. A kind voice answered, and I took a deep breath, forcing the words out. Hi. I think I need help. Making that appointment sparked a small, fragile hope in me. For the first time in a long while, I felt like maybe I could find a way to feel whole again. When I walked into Dr. Peter's office, the plain white walls felt oddly comforting, like a blank page where I could begin telling my story. I sat nervously, twisting my fingers as Dr. Peter looked at me with gentle eyes. Lauren, she said softly, why don't you tell me why you're here? Her voice was warm and encouraging. Slowly, I began to open up, sharing all the hurt, manipulation, and self-doubt I'd been carrying. Session by session, Dr. Peter helped me see patterns I hadn't noticed before, showing me how deeply Larry's words and Kelly's judgments had affected me. Your worth isn't determined by Larry's approval or Kelly's standards, Dr. Peter reminded me. What did Lauren love before all of this? That question struck me deeply. I thought back to a time when I found joy in cooking, not cooking to impress or please, but simply because I loved creating something delicious for myself. I realized I wanted to feel that happiness again. One evening, I stood in the kitchen and decided to cook just for me, letting myself enjoy each step, knowing this was the first small step to reclaiming my life. One day, I decided to make my favorite dessert from childhood, my grandmother's apple pie. As the warm, sweet smell of apples and cinnamon filled the kitchen, I felt a wave of comfort. Just then, Larry walked in, sniffed the air, and frowned. What's that smell? You know I prefer Mom's pecan pie, he said dismissively. For the first time in years, I didn't rush to please him. This is my grandmother's recipe, I said, my voice steady. I'm making it for myself. Larry looked shocked, and his expression was almost funny. That small act of standing up for myself gave me courage. I realized it was time to reconnect with someone important in my life, my sister Julie. Over the years, Larry's little manipulations had pushed us apart, but I reached out anyway. Julie welcomed me back with open arms. "I've missed you so much, Laura," she said, pulling me into a tight hug. "I always knew that guy was no good for you." With Julie's support and Dr. Peter's guidance, I began to find myself again. I threw myself into activities I had long forgotten, taking a cooking class, joining a book club, and even sketching plans for a dream cafe that I'd always wanted to open. At home, the tension grew thicker with each step I took toward being myself. Larry's calm, controlled attitude started to crack. One night, after I refused to cancel plans with Julie, he snapped, "Since when do you talk back to me?" I looked him in the eye and replied, "Since I remembered that I'm a person, not your puppet." The words surprised both of us, but I felt stronger than ever. Then, the final breaking point came on a rainy Thursday. I decided to surprise Larry by bringing lunch to his office. I thought maybe we could reconnect somehow, maybe find some peace. But as I walked toward his office door, I heard muffled laughter and a woman's voice say, "Oh, Larry, you're so bad. What would your little wifey say if she knew?" I froze, my heart sinking as I opened the door. There was Larry, wrapped up with Janet, a woman from a rival company. "Lauren." Larry leapt up, his face turning pale. "This isn't what it looks like." "I can explain." But I didn't want to hear any more explanations. I was done with excuses. I turned around and walked out, my heart racing with adrenaline. By the time he got home that evening, I was waiting with divorce papers. "What's this?" he sputtered. "Freedom," I replied calmly. "For both of us." His face twisted in anger. "You'll never survive without me. You're nothing." I stood my ground, thinking of all the self-worth I'd regained through therapy and the support of those who truly cared about me. "No, Larry," I said firmly. "I'm everything, and it's time I started living like it." As I packed my bags, I spotted my sketches for the cafe I'd dreamed of opening. I had lost so many years to Larry's control, but now, my future was mine to shape. I walked out of that house with my head held high, leaving behind the timid version of myself and stepping into the life of the strong, passionate Lauren I was always meant to be. The day I signed those divorce papers felt like a new beginning for me. Larry's face was filled with a mix of anger and shock as I walked away, but I didn't turn back. I had my fair settlement to my freedom, and my eyes set on the future, a future I would create from scratch. On the opening day of my cafe, Lauren's Haven, I was both nervous and excited. The smell of freshly baked pastries filled the air, and I watched as the first customers slowly came in. My fears faded as I saw smiles spread across their faces with each bite they took. Soon, word spread about my little cafe, and Lauren's Haven became the talk of the town. Food critics loved the cozy, welcoming atmosphere and the delicious dishes, but what meant the most to me were the regular customers who came for comfort and warmth. As the cafe grew, so did I. The insecure woman I had been with Larry was gone. In her place was a confident, happy Lauren, living life her way. I heard through the grapevine that Larry had married Janet, and all I could think was, poor guy. I knew exactly what kind of future awaited him with her. Months went by, and Lauren's Haven continued to thrive. Then, one rainy afternoon, a messy, unsteady figure stumbled into the cafe. It took me a moment to realize it was Larry. His clothes were soaked, and he smelled of cheap alcohol. "Lauren," he slurred, his voice shaky. "You have to help me. Janet, she took everything." Between hiccups and tears, he explained that Janet had tricked him into signing over his money and shares of his business. Now, she was gone, leaving him broke and broken. "Please, Lauren," he begged. "I have nothing left." I looked at him, this man who once controlled my life, and felt a strange mix of pity and satisfaction. "I'm sorry, Larry," I said, my voice calm. "But your problems aren't mine anymore." Just then, as if on cue, Kelly walked in. Her usual proud attitude was gone, replaced with a look of desperation. "Lauren, darling," she pleaded, "surely you can spare something? We are family, after all." I couldn't help but laugh, feeling lighter than ever. "Family?" I said, shaking my head. "You both made it clear that I was never good enough to be family. Please leave." "You're disturbing my customers." Larry and Kelly shuffled out into the rain, defeated. As they left, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It was as if the last tide in my old life had finally unraveled. The next morning, as I unlocked the doors to Lauren's Haven, I felt truly free. I had built a new life, one filled with joy, purpose, and self-respect. I had finally let go of the past, and the future was wide open, waiting for me to embrace it. I opened the newspaper one morning and was stunned to see that Lauren's Haven had been named the city's best cafe. I could hardly believe it. My little cafe had become a place that people not only enjoyed but celebrated. It was an incredible feeling, knowing that all my hard work and all the changes I'd gone through had led me to this moment. To celebrate, I invited my closest friends, including Joyce and Julie, along with other wonderful people I'd met along the way. As we gathered at the cafe, the atmosphere was filled with laughter and joy. We shared stories, and everyone seemed genuinely happy for me. It was heartwarming to look around and see my friends enjoying the space I had worked so hard to create. The warm smells of coffee and pastries filled the air as we toasted to the success of Lauren's Haven. At one point, I glanced out the window, and that's when I noticed someone standing outside. It was Larry, wearing a fast food uniform, looking through the glass with a longing expression on his face. He stood there, just watching us, perhaps remembering the life he had once been part of and the happiness he'd given up. I could see regret in his eyes as he saw the joy and success he no longer had. For a brief moment, our eyes met, and then he looked away, disappearing into the crowd. Seeing Larry like that was a powerful reminder of how much had changed. It also made me think about the choices we make and how they shape our lives. Larry had chosen his path, and I had chosen mine. But it wasn't easy getting here. I had faced so many challenges, doubts, and painful moments. Yet, each of those struggles had brought me closer to the life I had always wanted, a life of peace, independence, and fulfillment. If you were in my shoes, what would you have done after finding out about Larry's betrayal? Would you have confronted him immediately, letting out all that hurt and anger? Or would you have taken time to figure out your next steps, waiting until you were ready to take control of your life again? It's a tough question, and there's no easy answer. But I believe that sharing our stories and experiences can help us learn from each other. We each have our own journeys, but sometimes hearing about someone else's choices can give us the courage or clarity we need. If Lauren's journey resonates with you, please share your thoughts in the comments. Have you faced something similar in your life? How did you handle it, or what advice would you give to someone in a similar situation? Your experiences are valuable, and your voice could inspire or help someone who's going through their own struggles. If you enjoyed Lauren's story and want to hear more tales of people overcoming challenges and finding happiness, hit that like button and subscribe. Remember, every story has the power to make a difference, and your voice might be the one that brings hope to someone else's life. Thank you for being part of this journey. Let's keep inspiring one another and finding strength in our own unique paths.